but let's go to the Word of God for maybe the next half an hour or so. We'll read two verses, Mark chapter 6, verses 45 to 51. Mark chapter 6, verses 45 to 51, and Hebrew chapter 12, verse 2. So I'll read Mark chapter 6, verses 45 to 51. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself was sending the crowd away. After bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea, and he intended to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed that it was a ghost, and cried out. For they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke with them and said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly astonished. And Hebrew chapter 12, verse 2 is very familiar to all of us. It says, "Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Now, I know you're not really a lot of movie watchers in here, but most of the movies that is coming out in Hollywood lately are based on books. You know, you must have heard about Harry Potter, right? Like a big series, Harry Potter. It was based on a book. And then the latest, another sensation was they called Hunger Games. Hunger Games, you must have heard about this book. So these are very pop culture phenomena. That's based on a book. And a lot of other movies, these are very famous movies. A lot of other movies are based on books, and then they adapt it they write a screenplay for the movie. Now, when they do that thing, they normally bring in a team of writers to perfect the story which is already in the book. The writer of the book, which is the author, is not the same writer for the movie. They always use a different writer for the movie, because the movie and book are two different medium. So they want to make sure the story really fits in for the screen, because it has to have a perfect ending. It has to have a very cinematic ending, perfect ending, that otherwise it will affect the box office. You know, they are putting millions of dollars into it, so they want to make sure that the story is perfected. So even though the story has an author, they bring in a team of perfecters, and they become the writers of the movie, even though it's based on this book, which was authored by this other person. And I'm saying this in particular. Right now, I'm working on an article, which I'm actually, my professor is publishing a book, and he has asked me to write an article for the book, a chapter for the book, which is based on a movie called The Children of Men. I don't know how many of you heard that movie, Children of Men. It came out in 2006, and I strongly recommend you not to watch that movie, because it has a lot of cuss words, it's very violent, it's like flying body parts, it's bullets swirling all around. It's extremely violent movie, but it's a Christian movie, in the sense it's based on a Christian novel written by a very professing Christian writer called P.D. James, who happened to be a female, so it's a she, not a he. A P.D. James, I thought was a he. But so she wrote this novel called The Children of Men, which is basically the nativity story, which is the birth of the Jesus Christ, the story which is written in the today's world with the chaos and, so kind of a retelling of the nativity story, right? But then this was, the Hollywood fell in love with the book, and they brought in 5 writers, 5 writers, not just 1, 2, 3, 5 writers to retell or perfect the story for the screen. And it is directed by Alfonso Cuarón, who was the Oscar-winning director last year, the guy who did Gravity. Anyway, doesn't make any sense to you. You're like, what? Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is the author, P.D. James, who is the Christian author, so the author is not necessarily the perfecter. Did you get that? So there is an author who writes the story, who invents the story, who creates the plot and characters and all that. But then comes the perfecter who really perfects, culminate. All this action which is happening in the movie has to be culminated into a perfect ending. And then when you watch the movie, it is the same author, it's the same story, but it's completely different kind of a movie, like very different version of the story. Now, the verse which we read today in Hebrews, Jesus is introduced to us as the author and the perfecter of faith. And Paul is saying, when you are traveling in this world, when you are on your own journey, in spiritual journey, when you get tired, when you get dejected, when you are in this world of despair, then look to this man, fixing your eyes on Jesus, who is both the author and the perfecter of your faith. Now, the story which we read before is an example, and that's my point. So the story which we read in the beginning, and we all know that story, right? So there is a journey initiated by Jesus. So the background of the story is very famous. Walson Uncle preached a couple weeks ago. I preached a couple months ago where Jesus is distributing 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish for 5,000 plus people, right? It was a fantastic, very spectacular miracle. One of the most cinematic episodes in the whole gospel story. So this thing is happening right after. The first thing Jesus did, right after the miracle Jesus said, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethesda. Immediately after this, Jesus kind of forced them to go on a journey to the other side. They didn't start this journey, did they? No, Jesus asked them to go. Jesus forced them to go. Jesus made them go. It's funny that the author of that journey was Jesus. If you ask the disciples, they did not want to go at that time. Because that is, like I said, it's a very, very, it's one of those time in their life, in the public ministry of Jesus. Jesus had the highest rating, public rating at that time. Like we were talking about the rating of Obama and Donald Trump and all this political rating. Now they are at the peak of their rating. In the same way, that was the time when Jesus' rating was at the top. Here, Jesus had this great public rating, and that's not the time they wanted to go. And not only that, there were a lot of food in the table, right? There were a lot of bread, like 12 baskets full. And this is not the time I want to go to the other side. This is the time I want to stay in this side. None of the disciples really didn't want to go, but Jesus forced them. And all the 4 Gospels is very clear. Jesus wanted them to go to the other side. And Jesus said, I'm going to handle the crowd. It's funny. He said he himself was sending the crowd away. Can you imagine? Jesus, just one man, handling 5,000 plus crowd. All the help he had was he just asked them to go the other way. So they started this journey, the journey which was authored by Jesus. And then what happened? The wind came against them, right? The wind came against them. Sometimes that happens. Like even though Jesus initiates a journey, even though Jesus is the one who asks us to go someplace, it doesn't mean that it is going to be a smooth ride. Very often that happens. If I was in the boat, I'll be giving a tough time to Peter, who obviously the leader of the group. I'll be asking Peter, Peter, are you sure Jesus told you this? Are you sure Jesus said this? Are you sure Jesus asked us to go? Then why is it happening? The wind is coming against us. There is a big storm, coming up. And the boat is not going straight. Are you sure? Did you really hear Jesus saying this? There were 5,000 plus people. Did you hear his voice very clearly? Maybe he was saying something else. Well, if Jesus asked us to go, then why is he not here? Why is he staying there? I think we made a mistake, right? We might have made a mistake. And this is the time of suspicion. Because even though God or Jesus is the author of the journey, when the wind comes against us, we wonder. I was talking about me. I didn't say about the disciples. I'm sure if I was in the boat, Peter was going to have a tough time. Maybe he would have had to push me out of the boat. I would be nagging till the end of the journey because it doesn't make any sense to me that wind is coming against the journey, which Jesus himself authored, right? And then there is this very interesting verse which says, seeing them straining at the oars. So I thought Jesus was not in the boat. See, there was an episode before or after. There's another episode, very similar episode in the gospel story, as most of you know, where the disciples were in the boat and they were going. There was a big storm and the wind was coming against them. The waves were coming against them. But Jesus was in the boat, right? I mean, it's a little comfort that he is right here. I can see him. He is here. We are at that. So we are not going to sink. At least he is here. He is not going to sink. So there was some kind of comfort. But in this case, Jesus is not with them. Jesus left them and Jesus went to some kind of mountain to pray. That's what they are told. So now this is a very different predicament they are in. Where is Jesus? And they thought Jesus was not there. That's what I thought. That's the way it is written. But it says, seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them. So Jesus, even though geographically miles apart, it is written as if he was right there in that boat and he is seeing them. Not that he got a revelation or something like that. He was watching them all along, right? And seeing them, they were straining at the oars. Seeing them straining at the oars. Now, this is the interesting thing about stories. Like when you read a story written by anybody, for example, I don't know, something like Shakespeare. Everybody heard about Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare has written so many plays, right? Shakespeare is the guy of playwriting, Shakespeare. Now, if you read the story or the plays written by Shakespeare, you don't necessarily see a character named Shakespeare, right? He creates the characters and he lets the characters take the story according to the plot, right? In the same way, an author is always present in the story even though the characters cannot see them. Don't you think so? Because it's the author's mind's expression is the story, right? The author is always present in the story, but he is invisible. We don't want the author to be seen in the story because we want it to read as our own story. We are interested and engaged in the character's life. The characters cannot see the author, but it does not mean that the author is not present. The author is omnipresent in his story. And this is his story. He authored this story. He authored his journey. He initiated this journey, and it is for him to perfect it. And he is perfecting it. When Jesus asked them to go to the other side, he is already on the other side, as much as he is on this side, because the author is omnipresent. The author is both on this side and on the other side. That's why he said, you go on the other side. You don't have to worry about me because I am already there. When Jesus asks you to do something, the task is already done. We begin to finish, whereas God finishes to begin, because he lives in a timeless reality. You know what that even means? I don't know, but that's the way it works. Because God lives, that's why there is a verse in the Bible which says, the Lamb of God, Jesus is the Lamb of God who was slain from the foundation of the world. What does that mean? Jesus was slain from the foundation of the world. It is almost like a present continuous tense, like Jesus is being slain right from the foundation of the world to this day. But we know it as a historical event happened 2,000 years ago. We have no doubt about that. But the Bible says the Lamb of God who was slain from the foundation of the world. What does that mean? Because it is the sacrifice of Jesus is happening in a timeless reality. Because God lives in a timeless reality where when he starts a task, the task is finished at the same moment. That's what we call a timeless reality. When he plants a church, that church has already grown in his reality, in a timeless reality. When he asks you to do, Mathew, do a task, the task is already done in his timeless reality. But then it has to be translated into the time-bound world we live in. That is the problem. That's the problem we have. We are the characters written in this big story. We don't see the author. We say, where is the author? What's happening? We thought our story is written by God. But why is this wind coming against us? Why are we straining at the oar? Because we live in a time-bound world. Whereas God lives in a timeless reality. And we can't completely translate or fathom that meaning. You know, it's like... again, talking about movies, how many of you have seen a 3D movie? 3D movie? Have you seen 3D movies? Yeah, some of you 3D movies? No? Yeah, shame on you if you haven't. There are some good 3D movies, right? So if you go and watch a 3D movie, they give you a glass before you watch a 3D movie. Because you have to put that glass in, then you can see the 3D. It's a completely, you can't explain it because because we can only think in two-dimensional. We only think about two-dimensional pictures. This is three-dimensional. The characters, the dinosaur or whatever is coming into the theater, like jumping into your midst, right? It's all happening. Then you take that glass away just for a second. Then you see, I mean, have you ever tried that? You know, take the glass away, it kind of completely messes it up. Not only that the whole 3D thing is happening, even the picture itself is blurred. Like 2-3 pictures mashed together. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because it is a 3D reality being interpreted by this little glass they have given us. So this timeless reality which is happening in the screen, we need to have an interpretive screen which is faith, and without which it doesn't make any sense. Only when we are really in that timeless reality, in that eternal world, only then it will make sense. Otherwise, what does that even mean when Pastor Mathew says, God asks you to do something, it is already done? It doesn't make sense, right? Or when I say, when we start a task to finish it, God finishes it to start it. Because God first finishes it. Well, there is again no first or second in his vocabulary, but I'm just kind of playing with your mind a little bit. God might be finishing first to begin with. The point is, God is not just the author of the journey or not just the author of the story. He is also the perfecter of the story. The Bible is the story written by God, right? This is God's story. The ultimate story of God is in the Bible. How does the story start? Genesis chapter 1. And we see this earth full of void and chaos and darkness was in the face of the deep. What a chaotic beginning, right? And then in the end, in the Revelation, what do we see? God comes down, a new heaven, a new earth, right? A new heaven and a new earth. God says, this is my tabernacle, my dwelling among men. I am going to wipe away tears from every eyes. There will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any pain. There will no longer be any curse. And there will no longer be any night, because the Lamb of God that city doesn't need, the earth wouldn't need the light of the lamp or the light of the sun, because God himself will illuminate the world. See, God begins a story and he brings it to a perfect ending. But unfortunately, we live somewhere in the middle of the Bible. We still haven't gone to the time of Revelation yet, right? It is yet to come in our time-bound world. It is tomorrow. It is the future. But in the timeless world of God, the story is already written. We are somewhere in the middle, and God has asked us to write the story in the middle. And the whole Bible, that's why we talk about history class. Who does history? Who writes history? Men do it, right? Like human beings do it. The First World War, the Second World War. Who created this? God created this? We do the story in the middle. And that's why it messes up. Because from Genesis chapter 2, the story kind of changes into our hands. And that's what Annie was preaching last week. If you are not here, you missed it. He was speaking about the sovereignty of God and free will of God. Now that's something don't go very well together, right? How can God be sovereign? How can God has already written the story? How can, God has already decided the end? Then what do you mean you say you have free will? How does that even make sense? Right? This is something which Annie was trying to tackle. Since I played with your mind a little bit, so let me go all the way. How does that even happen? How can God be sovereign? And how can at the same time God say, well, I have given you free will? Well, one way to do it is, in my mind, I use an analogy of playing chess, right? Playing chess. How many of you play chess? Only Alex? Only Alex? Indians invented chess and only Alex play chess? Anyway, sorry, my wife is a master, actually. Yeah, there are other people. I was just making a joke, right? So you play chess. I'm not very good at chess. I know how to play chess, but I never really liked the game to that extent. But anyway, so when you play chess, I kind of know that even though I'm not very good at it, I don't think I can beat my wife because she is very good at it. But I know I can beat some people, right? Like, I'm just average or maybe below average. I'm not dumb. I can play chess, right? But if you're a chess master, say, they had this computer programs which play chess, right? You play chess with computer, man, that's a battle you are not going to win. Well, I hear there are some people who have won that kind of game, but imagine you're playing chess with a supercomputer, right? You're playing chess with a supercomputer and it's a timed game. Like an actual chess is a timed game. You only get this much time to make the next move. So if you play a timed chess game with a supercomputer, it doesn't matter whether you are Vishwanath Anand or some of these guys. It doesn't really matter. The computer, it's a supercomputer, and there is no way you are going to win that game. Because the computer can come up with all this permutation and combination as to what your next move is, and even when based on that, it can build up the next move, right? So when you play a chess game with the supercomputer, the end is already determined. In the sense, the sovereignty of the supercomputer completely bypass the results of your action. The supercomputer is going to win. But depending on the decisions you make, you can take this game to a different level. It will be very different me playing chess with a supercomputer, and it will be very different Joanne plays chess with supercomputer, and it will be completely different when Vishwanath Anand plays chess with supercomputer. Depending on the game, it's a complete free will. It's a complete free decision. Computer has no way to know what the next move is, but it doesn't really matter. The sovereignty is still going to be there, but still you can take this game to different levels. So that's why I said God has already started the story and God has already finished the story. But in the middle, we are playing a chess game with God. That's why all these crazy things are happening in the world. That's why we say we live in a fallen world. And this world has no regard for the God's supercomputer brain. And we think we are making this. We think it's our story. We think we got it in control. And that's why all these bad things are happening. That's why the middle of the Bible is a lot of confusion, right? Wars and terrorism and all these things happen even in the Bible. Because unfortunately, we are in the middle of the story. We are neither on that end nor on the other end. We are simply in the middle, striving on the oar and wondering, why is the wind coming against us? What happened to the author of the story? Where is he? I can't see him. What's happening, right? But the beautiful thing is, Santosh was talking about the Bible study we do Tuesday. It has been a big blessing for me. I've not been very regular, but whenever I come, we study this book called the Men of Character series, right? So the story of Paul, right? The story of Paul. So there is a table in that book, and unfortunately I forgot to bring that book. But I'm sure you can get it from anybody here. So we were studying it last Tuesday, and so there is this table in that book which kind of tabulates the life of Paul based on his age. So I never knew some of this stuff. Only when I saw the table I didn't know Paul lived for 67 years or something. And he had the conversion experience when he was 33. He had the conversion experience when he was 33. And then he began his first missionary journey only at 45. So he got converted at 33. And his first missionary journey happens only at 45. I was so surprised to see that. Only when I saw the table, man, like 12 years sitting in a church. He came to church. What if someone like Paul comes to our church? He was this well-educated, the best university, best education he had. He was the persecutor of the church, and he had this dramatic conversion. If he comes to my church, I will put him on the stage very next Sunday. And I'll make sure that he preaches in all crusades possible in the first month in Los Angeles, right? Because his testimony is so valuable. And 12 years, Paul is sitting on the corner of a church. Nobody is accepting him. Everybody is looking at him. I don't know if we can trust him. And he is sitting behind the back seat, listening to all this maybe terrible sermon. He was thinking, I could have done a better job. But he's sitting there for not 1 year, not 2 years, 12 years. Nothing is happening in his life. And he must have wondered, I'm striving at the oar. I don't know if I saw the real light. Was it Jesus? Or was it something else? Why is it happening? Where is this journey going? There is no perfecter in my journey. I thought Jesus was the author, but where is the perfecter? Why is the story going anywhere? So it's funny when Emmanuel made a comment in the class, which I thought was very, very interesting. And Emmanuel said, did you know that Paul never got to read this book? If Paul read this book at that time, you remember you said something very similar. If Paul had this table with him at that time, he would have been very happy because he had no idea when he was going through 12 years, there is going to be this, when he is 45, the things are going to change dramatically, and he's going to go on first missionary journey, second missionary journey, third missionary journey, completely busy minister, and in the end, 2,000 years after, there's some Indian guys in ICS sitting together and studying his life in a table, and Paul had no clue at that time in the 12 years because he was striving at the oar. All wind was against him. But the author had already perfected his story, stapled it, bound together, and given to all of us and uploaded it in Amazon. His story was already available in Amazon for everybody to buy, but unfortunately, Paul didn't get to buy it at that time. If only Paul had known that, his life would have been so good. And now that made me think that going back at home, I thought what Emmanuel said really made me think, did you know that God has a story, God has a book already written and available in maybe Amazon, about all our life? All our lives are tabulated like that. Because our faith journeys have authored by the God who can also perfect it. And there is a Men of Character series written in Mathew's name and in Emmanuel's name. And there is a Women of Character series too, I'm sure, written in Natasha's name or Minnie's name, everybody's name. And their life has already been tabulated because it is all happening in a timeless reality. And the story authored by God, and He is ever present. He is omnipresent. Characters cannot see the author, but it doesn't mean that author is not present. The author is very much present in the boat, and He's seeing you striving at the oar. That's the point I want to make. Fixing your eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of faith. And the next verse comes, and this is what it says: and despising the shame, endured the cross, despising the shame. So they say Jesus already, the verse starts like, who for joy that was set before him. So the author is describing Jesus Christ on the cross. Even while he was hanging on the cross, the writer of Hebrews says that he was already seeing a joy. Who for the joy, what joy was set on the cross or before the cross? We don't see anything, but Jesus could see the joy that was set before him even while he was hanging on the cross, because he lives in a timeless reality. And who for joy that was set before him and endured the cross, despising the shame. Between the chaos of Genesis and the harmony of Revelation lies the cross, which is in the middle of the Bible, right? And there is chaos in the Genesis. That's how the story starts. But there is harmony. There is beauty. There is paradise in the end. But between the chaos and the harmony lies the cross. And we are in the era of the cross. We are in the middle of that journey. And God is seeing us because it is His story. And very often we get confused because we think we write our own destiny. That's what Hollywood teaches us. And that's what the world teaches us. You write your own story. Self-empowerment. You get to say what you want to do. It's your life. It's individualism. It's capitalism. It's all about you, or I. But our story, if we live it to God, if we surrender, we don't have to strive at the end of the oar. All we need to do is just let it go, because the author is walking on the waves and he is coming right by you. And he is there. He is not just the author, he is also the perfecter.